welcome back to the broadcast on this special coverage of the by-elections. In different parts of the country, we had one senatorial race, 6 constituencies, and of course about 17 wards.
Yes, for the MCS.
Right, for the MCS, certainly. And of course, a lot has happened during the day. The voting started at 6 a.m. and the polling stations closed that exercise at about 5 p.m. Of course, then the counting process began at the polling stations, and of course that then to the tallying center. We'll be giving you a preview of exactly the IEBC process a little later. But time to get into some conversations, smart to unpack really what this means for the country and what this outcome really would signify for the national political scene, even in the country, right? So we do have, of course, Javas Bigambo, our governance specialist and political communications strategist, joining us this evening. Willis Otieno, Safina Party Deputy Party Leader, and Franklin Mukwanja, who's the Executive Director, Center for Multi-Party Democracy. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and joining us for this special coverage. I just want to get your quick thoughts, first of all, on what you think of the process so far from the beginning up until now. I'll start with you, Mr. Mukwanja.
Yeah, I think my observation on what's happened during the day is that our elections conversation is actually transitioning from the technical and administrative issues and capabilities of IEBC to do so to really the perception around the credibility of IEBC, whether the people have the trust in the electoral system. And that is happening because young people are moved particularly from being just passively resignated to the issue of participating to being really discerning skeptics. And they want to see that they really are agitating for change, but they want to be convinced that through the electoral system, that change can actually be delivered. And IEBC has been sitting for a main exam today, being the very first attempt to do something for the new commission. And we hope that now the jury is out there and will be evaluating this exercise and responding to, I thought they took quite a bit of time to address the issues of violence, to address the issues of misconduct, calling on the police to decisively deal with particularly the incidents that were happening outside of the the polling station, the claims of electoral misconduct, and those are things that we'll be evaluating and seeing is the Erastus Ethicon team up to task, up to speed? Are they able to inspire the necessary confidence? Have they passed the credibility test that will be able to heighten some level of public confidence, reduce the trust deficit that Kenyans have had doubts? And I think that is the real thing. Looking at the timing that the by-elections happened and whether they will have a bearing to the 2027 elections, I am not convinced that will be, because one of the things is that we do not have competitors for 2027 yet. The only competitor that is quite clear, His Excellency the President, decided to restrain himself and sit off and allow the second-tier politicians to run around and possibly tactfully so that he can also begin to cherry pick. If the outcome is what it is, it's being rumored that Kabuchai Ichwele, the bedroom of the Speaker of the National Assembly, may have been snatched from him. That begins to leverage other politicians that possibly the president would want to begin talking to. But once then the other side that my brother here belongs to begin to be considering him a running mate of sorts somewhere or a presidential candidate, then we begin to see who are the competitors and how that then determines the mobilization. The voter turnouts again indicating that parts of the country still are very lazy in terms of voting. average 60%. Mbeere North is very impressive, and this is quite the Mount Kenya region has been very civically woke for many years, and that tells you that that battle again will not just be about who gets it, but who excites the actual voter turnout, so that that big chunk of a basket of votes can be tapped into adequately.
Well, quite a lot to really cherry pick, and interesting thoughts there, Franklin. Let's get Willis. What have you seen in this by-election from both analysis point of view, but also from a political party point of view? What can we make of it? I know the results are not yet in. The provisional results, cannot trust it yet. So yes, what is it have you seen that we can start hanging our coats on?
As an elections practitioner, it's a sad day for Kenya, because if you look at our constitution, Article 81, it's very clear on the principles of the electoral system. The electoral system must be free from violence, intimidation, undue influence, and corruption. All those were present. In fact, you notice the incidence of voter turnout today. It was very low. Why? First news in the morning, by 9 o'clock, what you hear coming out of polling stations, an MP is being attacked somewhere, a vehicle has been burnt elsewhere. So in those contested elections, there were high incidents of violence. And in my view, those elections did not meet the threshold of the Constitution. Look at the deployment of the police across the country. I was seeing some images coming from Mbeere, where young men carrying logs, goons, so to speak, are throwing stones, and behind them are policemen, like giving them cover. So is this an election that is envisaged in our Constitution? So in my view, these elections, the by-elections, most of them, save for certain places in Baringo, I think Turkana, that there are no instances of violence. But where there are contestations, where we witnessed violence, those elections did not meet the threshold of the Constitution, and in my view, it was a loss. But politically speaking, for you to understand what has happened today, you start by asking, where was everybody before? So you go to divide the country into regions where there are major elections. Let's pick the Kisii region, for example. Where were all the major players before the by-elections? As at the last count of election, that was as at the last election, 2022. And where are they today? Looking at the results coming from the Gusii region, William Ruto has lost that vote, and his political caucus has lost that vote. It seems to be aligned towards a political party associated with Matiang'i. Go to the western region again, starting with Bungoma, go to Malava, which was a safe UDA seat, ANC Kenya Kwanza seat before. Now they are struggling to maintain it. They've lost it Kabuchai, so Kenya Kwanza has lost again. Go to Rift Valley, Baringo. That was a safe UDA seat. UDA has maintained it. There seems to be no contestation. Go to Mbeere, that is in the Gema region. Mbeere was almost near 100% Kenya Kwanza seat, the last elections. Now, until now, they are fighting tooth and nail to maintain it. And the competition is very tight, very close. So they are losing votes. If I was sitting with William Ruto, I can only tell him bye-bye. Because it means whatever you had before...
You're making so much out of this by-election.
No. What I'm saying, politically, I'm talking as of today. And as Frank says, there are going to be new formations. There are going to be new players. People are going to campaign nationally. But as of today, when we now say take home, even if you were to win in Mbeere, even if you were to win in Malava, but look at the cost of that, the so-called victory. Is it not what we call a Pyrrhic victory? Look at ODM, for example, in the Nyanza, the by-elections in Kasipul and Ugunja. So ODM seems to have safely maintained its vote in Ugunja, not a contest. But in Kasipul, there's a strong contest. But at least ODM has held its own and warded off the competition. Violence, but the margin from what is emerging seems to be a comfortable and assailable lead. So ODM has maintained their status. Go to Magarini, that was an ODM zone. ODM has maintained their votes. So the person who has lost tonight, in my view, based on what people had before today, the person who has lost is William Ruto.
Why do you say so? I mean, when you look at the significance of the outcome of these by-elections, does it hold or does it bear that much of a significance in the current national political, alignment?
If you look at the investment that Kenya Kwanza and William Ruto's team had on the certain specific by-elections, it does. In terms of their participation in Rift Valley, you didn't see much investment. Even they barely campaigned in Baringo, so to speak. They left to the candidate to run that campaign with some minor members of parliament, junior members of parliament, doing the work. But they hedged their bets on Malava. They hedged heavily on Mbeere North. They hedged heavily in Kabuchai, and they've lost in those ones. Or even if by losing I mean to the extent that it was a hotly contested, that becomes a loss. Whereas in 2022, they were winning in those areas by almost 60% of the votes cast. Now, if they are to win in any of those areas, they are winning by less than 5% of the votes cast. That becomes a loss politically. Because having so invested heavily in that election, you will expect that they are going to use it to try to create a national narrative that we are the party to beat. The national narrative now is you must deploy the police heavily, you must deploy goons, you must intimidate, attack candidates, which unfortunately for you, you may have those resources today because of by-election. But a general election, when the whole country is doing an election, where will you have those resources? Even that kind of deployment to manipulate, to intimidate, and even to scare away certain voters or to intimidate even candidates. Look at what this gentleman in Malava went through. Seth Panyako, I mean, you look at the pictures of what is happening to that man from last night to today, you actually wonder if this is an election. Malava has become Gaza. It's now beating Omar Migori in terms of the Gaza status of the Republic. That can't be an election. Right. So why were they doing all of that? To create a perception that they are a beatable campaign. But they have lost in terms of the narrative, in my view.
All right. So you say the test has been done. But I mean, a lot has happened today, Javas. From your perspective, what do you read from the by-elections? Do you still hold the view that this has been really a true political test for the top boys?
Well, I've listened to my relative Willis speak, and he's a serious political operative. But he forgets that in politics, even if you lose by a vote or two, you've lost. And a win is a win. Because in the end, the desire is to win. But the question is, what is it that we have witnessed today? I think a couple of things we have witnessed today. One is the battle for territorial dominance in terms of regions by political parties and political leaders. Second, what we have witnessed today, James, is a serious demonstration and exchange of our bad political culture by players and supporters of certain political leaders. What my brother Willis and my brother Frank have spoken quite eloquently about the issue of political violence that we have witnessed, which actually do not speak to the freeness and the fairness of the desired elections as sheltered by the Constitution, Article 81, on the principles of our electoral system. So there is a challenge there. But beyond the principles of our electoral system, there is the other important cog within our democracy. That is the code of conduct of political parties, which has been seriously violated. That code of conduct instructs political parties, and my brother Frank is here, is the executive director of Center for Multi-Party Democracy, which is an umbrella institution that handles and deals with the political parties, and they have gone out of their way to handle and engage political parties on how they can become critical instruments or pillars for democracy. These political parties, in this by-election, majority of them, first, have not been issue-based or issue-driven. Secondly, the issue of violence, the issue of intimidation, it is something that actually we must frown upon. I have seen vehicles torched. We've seen in the run-up to this date of the election, homes of certain political leaders, pelted with stones. We've seen individuals stripped to their nudity. We've seen it all. I have also quite painfully and consciously witnessed today a former Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya becoming a general of war in Mbeere, where he was beating the hell out of some supporters or some supporters of his opponent. I mean, really, this is somebody who's been an Attorney General, who's somebody who's been a Speaker of the National Assembly, a hallowed house, the august house that legislates. Now, even the many laws that he presided over their legislation, he's been out there going against their very own letter and spirit. So I think today, what Willis has said, that it's been a bit of a sad day to that extent. But it's also a good day because we come to the realization that when political leaders behave like children, voters will treat them as children. And also when voters behave as children, political leaders will treat them as children. It's a relationship that keeps on turning like a circle. But the miseducation of the voter, for me, is the greatest lesson. The miseducation of the Kenyan voter. When a Kenyan voter in certain parts of the country thinks that for them to show loyalty to a political party means carrying wooden batons and beating their opponents. I've also seen in Kasipul where an agent for, is it Boyd Were, that's Honorable Kaluma, was actually violently handled and in fact even injured. These are not things that we should be celebrating in a democracy such as ours under the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And so the miseducation of political parties, the miseducation of the Kenyan voter is something that I think we must invite ourselves to have clearer lenses and ask ourselves, what actually do we need in our democracy? When I see, for example, the former Attorney General, Justin Muturi, who had not been accredited, finding his way into polling stations and saying that he is a party leader, I mean, it would have been very easy for him to go to IEBC for accreditation. So I think the culture of impunity also has been demonstrated today, and it's something that we must condemn properly tonight and beyond.
Is it just today? Would you, why term it as miseducation of the political leaders and of Kenyans as well? Isn't this the same mindset and sort of narrative we have seen it throughout our elections?
I think there is a conscious path to miseducation, and that's why I'm calling it as such, because even just a few minutes ago, when you check Rigathi Gachagwa's X handle, he's been calling out his supporters to go from aged between 18 and 35 to go and storm polling stations. I mean, really, he knows the code of conduct for political parties and our elections regulations. For me, I think we need sobriety amongst our leaders. When political party leaders start making such pronouncements, I think it goes, he is educating and informing his supporters, which is miseducating them against the very laws and regulations that we have.
True.
So that's how I'm looking at it.
Right, gentlemen, the question of violence, which has been perverse today, is an underbelly with our Kenyan politics. It's nothing new. So we'd be sitting here saying, well, saying violence in politics is, today is something that's not witnessed with us. It's true. Guns are part and parcel of our politics. Perhaps what you've seen today is just a taste of how we'll run our politics in 2027. That it is possible. We have come to a place of acceptance that the people who can wield more violence are the ones who can get political seats. Have we just come to that agreement?
I think there are various dynamics to this. One, if you look at the violence that obtained in Western, it will be unfair to actually lay the entire blame on the inability of the police service to constrain or respond.
Who should we blame?
We will apportion blame, but let me give you my perspective first. That if you look at the conversation in Western today, the Mlembe Nation is about succession politics. It's about the two politicians who are in the Kenya Kwanza formation, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and the Speaker of the National Assembly, being looked at as not the good bargainers for the community. And that narrative has been adequately pushed by the Senator for Kakamega and the Governor for Trans Nzoia, who are challenging their being on the throne. And therefore, there's internal competition between the various leaders that really led to the boiling points that we have seen today. Although police have not decisively and adequately responded to those incidents, there were also incidences where there were some transfers of specific OCS within Malaba that raised the temperatures, and thinking that was it just an internal police administrative action, or was it actually transferring a police officer who maybe could not have been doing the bidding of one of the political camps. So all these are at play that we need to address. So that needs to be looked at. What is the role? And in addition to that, there is this thing called the super agents, where politicians are accredited to be agents, and then they go around roaming. And they are actually the ones moving around with these gunzis, you know, playing a role in this. And we know very well that the origins of these groups, while they have been going down, emanated with the attempts first to try and disrupt the Raila Sufuria demos in 2023, which was a function of Kenya Kwanza trying to counter the demos. And then in 2024, the emergence of the Gen Z on the street, it led to, again, the narrowing of political interests between Kenya Kwanza and parts of ODM to bring this Gunzi on the street to tackle the authentic Gen Z. And these people occasionally require to be rewarded with jobs. This by-election seemed to be an opportunity for them to be rewarded with some jobs, combined with these super agents that we are demanding as observers, that IEBC should clearly begin to define their role. Who is a super agent and what is their role? Are they allowed to roam freely? Or what is the role of an agent? Is it in the polling station? And what should be their conduct when they are out of the polling station? All right, because there's something there that needs to be adequately addressed.
It's ambiguous at this point.
Yes, and particularly going also to the strict enforcement of party agent conduct regulations, because this is where the challenge is. Who are these agents, and what is their what should inform their conduct within the police station and outside of the police station? Because if you have largely these particularly elected politicians, if you look at Malaba, for instance, the role of the member of parliament for Lugari in this, the role of the governor of Kakamega in this, the role of the deputy governor in this, and how were they linking with some of these actors that didn't have a role but just were outside the polling station. The police cannot consider them a threat as long as they are keeping, is it 200, 300 meters away from the polling station. But what is the interaction and how is it going to cause challenges within the electoral process? But the issue of violence and impunity is a critical issue. You have challenges that happened in Kabuchai Chwele, they have not been addressed. There are challenges that have happened in Malaba, they have not been addressed. IEBC needs to be more agile on this. The statement that was issued way late in the day at 5 p.m. was not sufficient enough. All right? And the focus can be on an IEBC as smart, but IEBC alone cannot deliver an election. These electoral management bodies, including the police service, must take responsibility for their commissions or otherwise of not acting.
Let me read, Willis, through something that Senior Counsel James Orengo said there before you make your comments. He wrote this early on Twitter, said, "We can't be first world if years after Constitution 2010, we can't hold peaceful and fair elections. The militarization and gunification of election is an evil worse than Mlolongo. The East African neighborhood is becoming, or has been, extremely intolerant and despotic." Again, to make the point that we're just getting clear that for the first time, this goonification of our politics. That has been an underbelly of our politics. Is just playing out. And this is our new reality. And there's really no one, no institution whatsoever that is able to handle this and rein in the goonification of our politics. Is that a correct lens to look at?
It's true. It's true. In fact, the first step, you asked the question of who should we blame. Maybe my friend, because he works the political party, is a bit polite. We blame legacy politicians, number one. Those who want to maintain their positions at all costs. This is all they know. They're the ones who gave birth to these goons. They're the ones feeding these goons, and now they're deploying them to undermine the provisions of our constitution. It is about holding power. When my brother and in-law here says that it's whoever won, even if you win by 1 vote, and you won. I mean, what victory are you going to have when people have died out of that process? There's no victory there. Because it's not a competition of individuals that I'm ahead of you, I'm first past the post. No. The competition in politics should be a competition of ideas, because you are seeking to represent the people. It's a donation of sovereignty. So victory should be that the people have won by choosing this particular policy. Not that this individual, that you have won by 1 vote, now we are celebrating. What are you celebrating? Because you are there to serve all Kenyans. Whoever becomes a member of parliament is not just representing the constituency, but is a national legislature representing the whole country. The second person that we must blame after legacy politicians is the IEBC. If at the end of all this, after seeing what I've witnessed, and I'm calling this election, this was Gaza, that you still proceed to declare and issue certificates of a winner, then why do we have elections code of conduct? Why do we have an enforcement committee? IEBC need to crack the whip. At some point, the commission should say, what is going on is not the elections envisaged by the constitution. We nullify the elections. Call it off. Send a message to the legacy politicians that if you engage in this goonification of our politics and over secularization of our politics, of our elections, then there are consequences. The more you deploy goons, the more we'll postpone those elections. We'll cancel them. We'll nullify them before they are concluded.
Is there anything you've seen today, as you make your point, that someone can go to court to cancel these elections?
There's
Is there anything
There's so much. But the problem now is this. Why are you kicking the ball to the courts? When the primary agencies should be doing their work. Because we have this habit in Kenya that go to court. Those judges have nothing to do with the elections. Those judges don't superintend elections. Now, because you don't want to solve your problems, you want to live according to the constitution, now we say take it to court. Why? Why are you kicking the ball to the judges? We should be asking the IEBC, you are the enforcer of the electoral code of conduct. Crack the whip. So when there is violence, when there is destruction of property, and I told you, these things happen early in the morning. They start in the morning for a reason. It is meant to send a chill down the spine of the voter who has not left his house, that today, people are being beaten there, it's tear gas, cars are being burnt. They not come out.
So in your assessment, the electoral agency has failed in
failed.
The process?
It has totally failed to the extent that we are not seeing the whip being cracked on legacy politicians who are committing acts of violence, acts of undermining the areas of our sovereignty. IEBC needs to do that. Number 3, and I'll tell you the people I'm going to blame today. Number 3 are the surrogates of legacy politicians. The ones who are the talking heads, who come and use smooth tongues to explain to Kenyans, try to chastise a very bastardized process from the beginning. They try to use sweet language, English, nice sounding terms to make it appear like this competition is all about CG 1 term, 2 term, it's about Gachagua and Ruto. No. They move the people away from the core of the elections. We are not now discussing the elections based on the principles of our electoral system in the constitution. So we must blame the surrogates who are amplifying and are the ones selling this message. The last group I'm going to blame our media. And I blame our media for this. After doing your work so well the whole day, because what we've witnessed today is because the media brought it to our attention, both mainstream, social, and digital. They captured the information. But post facto, tomorrow morning, winners and losers, and they start putting people celebrating a very violent electoral process. The media in terms of deduction, drawing conclusions from what they've fed us today, what we've all witnessed, because they accurately captured what has happened. But how do we draw our conclusions out of that outcome? The media should say, I mean, there's no election here. Based on what we've shown you as Kenyans, there was no election. This was Gaza. The Kenyan people have lost. Their sovereignty has been captured. This is a goon, what you call a goon coup. And IBC is just but legitimizing it by giving that certificate of a winner.
Let me read out for you a statement that was released by IEBC a couple of hours ago as we started this broadcast. I'm not sure if you saw that. And then I'll give James Smart, who is in a better position to tell us if the media has failed, because I don't believe that's so. But it says the IEBC has noted with grave concern the incidences of violence, intimidation and disruption reported in parts of the country during today's by-election. It condemns, in the strongest terms possible, the acts of violence, hooliganism and lawlessness, right? And then it goes on to talk about the violated article, which is 81E of the Constitution of Kenya. And such conduct further contravening the Elections Act of 2011 and the Elections Offences Act of 2016, and further the Elections General Regulations Act of 2012. So what does it say? It concludes that the Commission reiterates that access to polling stations during counting and to tallying centers during verification will strictly follow the law, and only the following persons are now permitted access: IEBC officials on duty, accredited party and candidates agents, accredited observers, assigned security personnel, accredited media where possible. It's called and urged all security officers assigned to IEBC duties and those deployed generally in the by-election area to remain on high alert, vigilant and responsive. In equal measure, the Commission has called upon the National Police Service and DCI to investigate all reported incidences of violence and ensure that individuals found culpable are arrested and held accountable in accordance with the law. You talked about the Code of Conduct. They say the IEBC Elections Code of Conduct Committee will take action on any complaints relating to breaches of the Elections Code of Conduct, the Elections Act and all other laws governing the elections of Kenya. And I think, goes on to commend the citizens of Kenya for maintaining peace and order in parts of the other areas in the voting period. He says the few incidences of violence should not overshadow the commendable commitment demonstrated by the majority of voters in exercising their democratic right to elect leaders of their choice.
You know, that statement alone is an oxymoron. The gist of that statement is violence, acts of intimidation. That is why they issued the statement. Then they go and conclude by saying, oh, actually, it was not even worth it. Majority of Kenyans have voted and everything is okay. And they're back passing, what I keep telling you. Everybody wants to kick the ball to the next person. Oh, there's the police, DCI. You are the enforcer of the Electoral Code of Conduct. There is violence, untold violence meted against Kenyans. And you know very well, even now if I threw tear gas here, the next speakers on this panel will not come. To them they'll know NTV is now Gaza. Kuna vita. So the moment violence starts in the morning, you've disrupted the entire elections for the day. So why continue with it? Just because you want at the end of the day to say, oh, we have an MP. If you are not forceful as a commission in setting out your sanctions on violators of the Code of Conduct, then you're wasting everybody's time. It becomes a conveyor belt. You're actually emboldening the legacy politicians that actually to win, all I need is to get goons.
So let me ask you, IEBC doesn't operate in a vacuum. Yes, there are the enforcers, but at the end of it all, they are expected to collaborate with security agencies, for example, the National Police Service. And when they speak about allow the police to investigate such incidences, to what point have they failed?
The purpose of the police is to investigate for the sole reason of apprehending the perpetrators and taking them to court to answer the criminal offenses. But what we are talking about is the donation of the sovereignty at the point when that donation of sovereignty has been interfered with through acts of violence. Why do you allow, as an enforcer of the code of conduct, as the referee, that let's just continue to finish the game? Part of it should be that the environment is such that we cannot continue with the game. Because the electoral system must be free from violence, intimidation. When there's the kind of violence we witnessed here, why are you finishing that game? Crack the whip and say the environment has been contaminated. Whatever now is going on cannot meet the thresholds of a free and fair elections as captured in Article 81. So the returning officer says these emergencies, these emerging issues have now made it untenable to continue with the elections. So we cancel that election. Then law enforcement comes later on the question of who were the people responsible. But you don't sanitize the process by saying, okay, it's okay, let the goons run over elections. Hopefully, they'll be arrested later after we've declared a winner. It doesn't work that way.
Jarvis.
Jarvis, this codification of this election, and it's a sticking point because it's not only rearing its ugly head, but it suggests this is how we'll run politics. What's the threshold of this violent becoming something that stops the election, or should we just not worry? 27 comes, we'll have better elections.
Well, James, I would say that what we all agree is that there is a symbiotic relationship, an intimate relationship between politics and violence in our political culture, which is not a good thing. And we must do much to rid our politics of violence and all malpractices. I would ask myself, what have other countries done? Of course, in the global south, we still struggle with the issues of electoral violence. But when you look at other countries, they go to elections, and even when you visit them, you would not even know they have elections the following day. Life goes on. Today, there are a number of people, and you asked earlier questions to do with the low voter turnout. There's the issue of the fear of violence by persons with disability, by women, etc. These are issues of concern that need to be addressed moving forward. And it requires multi-stakeholder engagement. I want to pleasantly imagine that in the not too distant future, the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, headed by my kindred, Franco Mukwanja, will start having discourses around all these issues. How can all these players come together to see how we can embrace a more cultured election or elections? Secondly, there is the place of the young people in this country. We've had continuous voter registration. Most young people have not registered. When you look at the statistics and how IEBC had initially projected.
Right.
Today, you realize too that most young people have not turned out to vote. It begs the question, what is on the mind of young people in this country? The quote unquote, the Gen Z, which is now a new term in our political lexicon. What is it and what's their role moving forward in our elections and our democracy? How can they be, inspired more to play more critical roles? Of course, from the projections, we can see that the outcome of these elections have been painted in broad-based colors, just as Michelangelo painted pictures with all the clarity. But politics is about competition. However, I decry tonight that for the longest time, we have not seen a competition of ideas. We have seen supporters competing on who can be more violent than the other. We need to rise to go to the higher ground of where we are competing about ideas. And also during the campaigns, not just to have an exchange of invectives. The other thing that even politicians have also learned tonight is that elections are not won through press conferences. Go out, hunt the vote. But intimidation alone is not the answer to winning an election. I say this because, and my kindred Willis has talked about what needs to be done. We have got best practices by electoral management bodies all around the world. I hold a fairly exalted view of IEBC, much as there's much more that can be done and needs to be done by IEBC in ensuring that we have got free, fair elections, that the code of conduct is respected, but now it calls for the urgency of attention by all the critical actors, the stakeholders, the security agencies, well, the judiciary, IEBC itself, we the people, the sovereign, civil society organizations, etc. Political parties are central to all this. Now, when we see what has been happening, we realize that even political parties need to pull their socks from around their anklets. Complaining alone. A few days ago, for example, I saw Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka say that they have got credible evidence that some IEBC officials have been compromised and that there are ballots that have been stashed. Which evidence he did not even indicate exactly. He did not name the particular election officers, which particular election centers that these ballot papers were to be taken, etc. And I think we need to have, I'm talking about responsibility on part of leaders, not to be making incendiary remarks that can end up being just incitement to their supporters and voters. These are things that actually we must also condemn. And that's why all political parties, as they try to edge each other out and slice a piece of support bases, etc. And my relative here, Deputy Party Leader of Safina, they shied away from this election. I don't know why. Maybe they're waiting for 2027. But I think political parties, and Frank is here, need to heed the call of ensuring that election code of conduct, best practices are embraced. Because where does all this malpractice begin? During nominations within political parties, the injustices there. The other day we saw IEBC finding 1 million shillings of, to Boyd Were and Zita Rocco. But that's not enough. I think in terms of proper investigations after all this that has happened, I want to pleasantly imagine that individuals who have occasioned all these forms of violence are going to be apprehended, and then proper investigations done, and then let them face, be brought to book.
I think this, I want to go back to this point, because I think 2 weeks ago we, had research from Odipotev that brought this question of goons. And there's an imagination that there's some certain sect of politicians, legacy politicians, we just call them, who understand politics, and the incentive for violence in politics is literally embedded in our politics. So I want to dissuade all of us from imagining that there's someone who doesn't want goons. We actually need goons in politics, and they're embedded in our politics. That is how it is, just as the truth. These goons, it's young people, unemployed, who get employment by moving around with politicians. They don't go anywhere. These goons are not people from space. It's our electoral culture.
No, James, there are sangueñas and there are goons. Sangueñas are okay. Sangueña are, I call them the political hotheads. They're just people who are politically active, they love politics, they follow politicians. And they go to political functions. You'll even find someone who is based in Mombasa attending a political function down in Kisii. They are called sangueñas. That's okay. The goons are people who come to cause violence.
But what is certifies them?
That is the problem.
Because
No. In fact, goons, part of why they come to political space is, number one, there's the monetary incentive that they're given. But beyond even just the monetary incentive, they're the ones who, after the meeting, start robbing citizens, right? To them, a political gathering is an opportunity to go shopping. So they'll be paid to come. Some are actually paid money to go and cause the chaos. So we focus on the goons, not the sangueña. Sangueña is okay. Sangueña will do his work, will propagate his political ideals. He may be a young man who is unemployed, but is passionate about politics. He's not a violent person by nature. He's just happens that the system has broken him down. He has no other economic activities engaging him, so he's reaping from politics.
But you do agree, that's a very blurry line.
No, I mean, if you, like for me, why I'm able to tell, I can tell you, if I meet a and I know them, many of them I know.
You know them by the
I know
mere fact
Sangwenyas
that you're a
because,
politician.
Yes, I'm in the space, you can tell. The goons, when they come to political space, they don't even have the patience to listen. It's either they was paid, go and cause chaos, or they've arrived and the first order of business start targeting who are the vulnerable people in this political gathering, or passers-by, women going to the market, young girls going to school, kids going to school, and start robbing them. So, and the people who have allowed this are the legacy politicians, and we must keep calling them for who they are. They are not the typical Kenyan politician. Because when I look at our history, our politics has never been about this. When Martin Shikuku used to talk, in fact, Martin Shikuku once told us in a forum of civil society group that in our time, all I needed in politics was just a stool and a megaphone. Not even a coin. Just give me a stool and a megaphone. And Kenyans will go and listen to the conversation. We used to have instances where even rivaling political parties will share a podium, a campaign rally, and they all address the same crowd. But today, the legacy politicians have turned it. That if my rival is doing a rally somewhere, my duty is to go and look for the goons to disrupt it.
Okay.
Smart, let me profile what we are observing. One, the advancement of tech has shifted a lot of the violence to online space, right? So you have the people that the political class would usually use to sustain their relevance on the ground by intimidating, harassing, and making sure that no one else has space, moved that space into the WhatsApp groups, and therefore the bloggers are generally dominating the transactional nature of our politics. And therefore, you have a scenario where some of the politicians actually are captives, are hostages of these goons that have not evolved to the digital space. So there's that twerk that has happened. But this transactional political culture is actually our problem. And unless we begin to address the issue of whether we want to reinvent and renovate our political culture, whether it is violence in the online space or the people that are now feeling jobless. Because you go to City Hall, around City Hall, and you will see some very healthy, pot-bellied political hoodlums that hang around there, that even MCS would think otherwise to come out. Just for an MC of Nairobi County Assembly crossing from the assembly offices to Pronto requires cover. And these are the people that have lost ground because of the shift of the politics from mere confrontations physically to the digital space. So they are trying to reinforce their relevance. Some of them actually, if you've interacted with politics, you realize that politicians are afraid and they have to pay some sort of ransom to be safe themselves. I'm not defending politicians, but I'm just putting as it is.
But they created this mess.
Yes, they created this mess. But I'm just telling you the advancement of this. Now, how do we sort about this? It is important to place responsibility to the institutions of political parties. I do not think IEBC is sorting out anything other than the independent candidate that will be tackled as an independent candidate. The challenges of a candidate that belongs to a party, it is the party that must feel the pinch. It is the party that must feel the pain. That is when the legacy politicians will begin to respond to the bad manners. Because this violence is not something that we can legislate about. It's because about manners, all right? So we must transfer this pain, this loss, to the party, the institution, not the individual candidate. Then in 2027 going forward to 2027, the largest demography that we'll have on our voters' roll is this age between 18 to 34. It is estimated that our overall population is about 17 million of these people. Registered 100%, that will be a huge demography.
It is.
And that means that the most important clientele for IEBC is this young person. The idea of the Kenyan politician looking at a young person as a vote is a very wrong perception. And young people are naturally annoyed by that valuation. that the only thing you look like, you are a good vote. And you are my ethnic and you could be my block of a vote. We need to look at these young people holistically, all right? How can young people be offered employment? How can our election create employment for young people, all right, as poll workers, so that we can train them, engage them, inculcate them in a different culture, that they need to be the credible consumers and suppliers of this positive political culture of volunteerism, of understanding that the electoral system relies on us, our credibility as a people, to be able to push it forward. If you ask Safina, deputy party leader here, and if they have a presidential candidate, and you have about 50,000 polling stations in 2027, and you need to man all of them, and you need about 2 party agents there, you're running into billions. There's no single candidate, there's no single party that can be able to do that. We need to see that the incumbency elections that we're having in 2027, we could possibly facing a challenge of violence that would grow from this. So how can these young people be prepared to participate in early warning, early response, and peace building? How can they observe? How can they monitor? So that they feel that we're not just being looked as voters, but we actually candidates, we are actually monitors, we are actually observers, we are poll workers, and the credibility of this election should be looked at the role that we're playing in and not just the others. Particularly, a politically exposed person tag is a very difficult tag. And Willis is here, has come of age, he has his own means, and he can survive that. He fails an election, he will go back to his law practice.
He's not a legacy politician.
Yes. Do his picky pongi in the Supreme Court. But these young people will be many candidates, possibly in 2027. Are we even educating them on the post-election pathways? How can they survive in the aftermath of losing an MCA in Ngara? Can they be appointed chief officer in Kisumu because of the positive politics they're doing?
And I would just to come back really and discuss those issues. Indeed, smart, very critical matters when we're looking at that demographic. But we'll come back and continue that conversation and also touch base with our reporters across the different parts of the country where we had the by-elections. Let's just take a quick break. We'll be back with much more. Stay with us.